Furlong, I just want to clarify the RFP. The RFP is not for one particular project.
Okay.
The RFP is for an engineering firm or a like firm to manage all of those
Okay,
projects
that's what I
over a
thought
certain
until the
period
way
of
it was
time.
worded. All of a sudden, it sounded like it was a project. And
Well, we needed to make sure we clarify what would happen for the summer, because the handoff could be in July, and July is a very busy time for the
Okay.
firm that we're talking about around schools, because that's when they're doing most of the projects.
All right, thank you very much.
So I just wanted to ask, as far as the prom is concerned, are the students choosing, the students are choosing all of these services and what they want, right? Or they want the ice cream and they're paying for it? So it's not, it's,
Correct.
okay.
I just think they need to do the math.
I hear what you're saying.
I did the same thing in my wedding. I did the same thing in my wedding.
Yeah,
They only paid for the drinks they served.
exactly.
Okay, the next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for March 12th, and I'm going to adjourn and we'll move into finance. I'm sorry, facilities.
You can read it, because we know we need that one.
Okay, so we'll take a 20-second breather here.
20 seconds? Really?
That's it, man. I have to walk back and get the sign.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's exactly my friend's wedding.
All right, so we'll start the Facilities
So wait for
Committee
them to
meeting.
drop it right to the bottom
Thank you.
line.
Once we read
The Penridge School Board welcomes public comment according to policy 903. We remind everyone of the following. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the board. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and note their name and municipality. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer rather than individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. The speaker may speak only once during each comment period. Please note, these sessions are designated for comments. To protect the confidentiality and privacy rights of all members of our community, the board encourages members of the public to direct any comments regarding particular individuals, such as students or district employees, privately to the superintendent or other appropriate administrators, or board members, or to communicate with the board and superintendent privately by sending an email to psdschoolboard@penridge.org. Questions raised and not addressed may be followed up at a later time. So at this time, I'll open it up to public comment, and we do have 2 people signed up. So Christine?
Hello, Christine Lazoch. First, I want to thank the board for all the hard work that you do. I know you definitely don't hear that enough. I saw on the agenda about an hour before the meeting started that you were talking about kindergarten busing, so I just wanted to come and show my support. I think it would help so many parents, so many working parents. The hours of kindergarten are very tough to deal with. I'm currently looking for options for my twins right now who are going into kindergarten next year. But, you know, Penridge is behind the 8 ball when it comes to busing. You know, how many school districts, North Penn, Quakertown, Palisades, I believe all have full-time kindergarten. Central Bucks, Solderton, the ones that I quick Googled before I came, they all have busing. I didn't find a single school district that didn't offer busing or full-day kindergarten. Ultimately, we'd love to see full-day kindergarten, but we'll take busing for next year if we can get that. But, you know, study after study shows how important early education is. I don't need to tell you that, you know that much more than I do. But just wanted to show my support and thank you for your work.
Mrs. Fairlawn?
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. The state mandates that we educate children grades 1 through 12. Kindergarten is not mandated. You cannot force anyone to send their child. I don't care if you bus people. I do care if you ask me to pay for it. Parents should be responsible for all kindergarten charges, including busing. I'm not debating whether or not kindergarten is good for children. That is not the question. The question is, if it is provided by the school district when it is not mandated by the state, then how can you mandate that I pay taxes for a service that you have no authority to tax me for? Kindergarten is not mandated in the state education law. Even the teachers should be paid for by the parents. I think it's a great thing. I worked at, what was it? Preschool Head Start. And I know that it helps the kids. I'm not debating that. But I am telling you, the state of Pennsylvania does not give local school boards authority to tax me for kindergarten. It gives you the authority to tax me for services for grades 1 through 12. If you're not sure about it, look it up. Provide transportation, figure out how much it costs, and let the parent pay for it if it's a convenience for them. You should do the same for the classroom teacher, aides, teaching supplies, and all the rest as well. I know that's not popular. I know people think that they're like, oh, but it's so good for kids. I'm not denying that, but you are not legally mandated to tax me for that service. You have no authority to do so.
Thank you. Any other public comment before we move on? Sir? Please state your name and municipality.
Alex Rajan, Bedminster Township. I heard Sue's argument about not being mandated by the state. Is there any other thing that's not mandated by the state that we do provide services for? Just asking.
Lots of things.
Thank you.
Charge tuition for summer school.
Thank you. Anybody else? Public comment? Okay, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is obsolete items for review. First item up is at Grass Elementary, various equipment for public surplus. Anybody have any questions on that? The board? Okay. Next item, Technology Department, various equipment, public surplus, and the January technology recycle law. Questions? Anybody? No? And the last item is the maintenance truck going to public surplus. Our 1973 maintenance truck. It's a classic. All right. Any concerns? Everybody okay with moving this forward to the board meeting? Okay. So good. Next item up is kindergarten busing discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bolt.
Thank you for the time and your patience with us trying to hold this meeting. So I do appreciate you rushing to get here for 5 o'clock tonight. One of probably the top 3 items when I talk to parents, you don't have to talk to them very long before you hear the word kindergarten. And so they either talk about full-day kindergarten, or they talk about kindergarten busing, or they talk about both. And so I did ask transportation and said, well, if we had a conversation, what would that mean if we decided to bus kindergarten students? So what the transportation department did was they took all of the current kindergarten students and hand scheduled them. So it was quite a task, so I do want to thank the transportation department. But they literally, to get one sense for what would the impact be, they took real kids. Because it's hard to anticipate next year's kindergarten students. If they have a sibling, it's a little easier, but first-time kindergarten students and families making the decision between full-day programs and half-day, obviously we don't know how many would choose what. So they looked at the current kindergarten students. They took every student who's currently in kindergarten and put them onto existing bus routes. They looked where they lived, and they said, okay, if we were to bus them, what bus would they go on? There obviously were multiple buses that then went over the limit for their run, based on how many students are currently there on that bus. What they then looked to do was to see are there easy switches to routes for two buses that are nearby. So it might be two buses go into the same neighborhood, and by flipping one stop to bus A instead of bus B, it balances both buses when you put kindergarten students in. Obviously, the buses don't need that now because the kindergarten students are not on the bus. But if they were added to that bus, would they put them over? They were able to do that for the current kindergarten students for every run except for one. So there was one run where there was not an easy fix. There would be a fix where we could add 15, 20 minutes to a bus run. And I said, well, let's not go there yet, right? Because we do also want to make sure our bus runs are not exorbitant length. There's already some of them that people would say are too long. And so I asked them to not to use that as a variable. And so they looked at it and said, well, it would be one run. It would be one run that does not impact middle school and high school. And so it is not one what I would call full run for a bus driver, because the bus driver would only have to add on an elementary run. It would most likely be a current driver who is doing something at the high school level or might be doing a private school and could make an extra elementary run as part of their part-time day. We do currently have spare buses, and we do have a fair number that would allow us to operate if we had to utilize this one bus for this one run. So that is no promise that every year will look exactly the same, because if you put the same number of kindergarten students but put them in different houses, those variables will change. I'm now putting them on different buses. So what I can promise you is if that the same kids in kindergarten were in kindergarten next year, I could do it with one extra run. We just freeze time. Now, what I can say with some level of certainty in talking to transportation who knows what's normal and not normal, runs do not change dramatically from year to year. There are times where stops change, and you might get the triplets to move out. You know, and you get those types of things where there are some oddities. But for the most part, runs are pretty static, which means they are fairly certain that based on the runs we currently have, it would not be a significant change to what we were doing, and that they predicted that it may in fact be no additional runs. There are ways where you could do it if we could get 11 of these students to be someplace else and rearrange some things. But even if not one, perhaps even two, which would not cost busing issues. We would not need buses, and that's the real cost of this if we were to purchase buses. This is off of the recommendation that we bus when we already bus. The districts that were mentioned, to a person if they have half day, if they bus one direction. I know one school district in the Tri-County area that buses both directions for a half-day program, but only one. And so almost every other school district buses in the morning for AM, because that's when our buses are running, and they bus in the PM on the way home for the PM students, because that's when our buses are running. So there would be no midday service. We did anticipate that it could cause some additional families to choose Penridge Kindergarten. They might choose it because that at least takes one variable off their plate, and that that full day thing is not as important to them as the transportation and the ease of that. Or maybe they'll continue to utilize another half-day service like the Children of America or our after-school programs and those pieces. And so we're even comfortable that if we were to increase our enrollment by perhaps 10%, that our numbers still would be fine in terms of our busing runs, and that we would not have to come back in July and say, oh my goodness, we need 6 extra buses. We are confident that this is something you want to move forward in terms of discussion. So I just asked them to do that, and when the data came back the way it did, I wanted to at least present that to you publicly, to be able to say that's all we've done thus far. So we did look to see what it would entail. We are fairly confident, and I would even actually go further than fairly confident. I am confident that this would not be something that is going to be drastically different from anywhere from 0 to 1 or 2 runs, only for the elementary piece that we could add to a current part-time person to just increase their hours from that standpoint. And so I wanted to offer that to the board for you to have some discussion. It obviously is not a decision. It's not on the agenda tonight. It's not a voting matter. It's not, we're not making an official decree. But I wanted to see whether there was other information you were thinking of, other questions you had that either we could answer or we could get the information that would help you decide whether this is something we want to move forward with. Okay?
So I just want to thank you for getting the accurate numbers on this, because I know some of us have been talking about this for a long time, and we've always gotten well, if you add one bus to each school, this is what it would be, but we all know that you wouldn't add one bus to each school. And so looking at this with actual numbers and actual kids makes it a lot easier to look at this, you know, to see what the impacts would be and be able to plan for it. And the fact that you can absorb them, I mean, when you look at how much our enrollment has dropped per school, we're really within, you know, we're within the amount of kids that have dropped as far as enrollment. So it makes sense that we would be able to absorb those kids. And one of the frustrations I heard from a lot of parents is, you know, I wait for my one kid to get on the bus, and then I have to follow the bus to school 10 minutes, you know, a few minutes later to get my kid on the bus. And the other thing that I think we should point out is it adds, what is it 15 minutes per, so AM kindergarten will then get 15 minutes of extra instructional time, and PM kindergarten will get another 15 minutes of instructional time. And that's huge, that's huge. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot when you're talking about how short the day is to begin with. And so I know a lot of people are going to be really excited about that additional time as well. So
Sounds like you've already made your mind up.
so, well, I'm only one person, but I think absorbing this, it's you know, I think you're absorbing the kids that are with your buses that you already have. It's not adding the midday run, right? It's not adding an additional run in the middle of the day. So for me, I think this makes a lot of sense.
No, I was just going to point out the time.
Oh, the extra 15 minutes?
I have a question about. I never get it right. One of these days. So I just have a question about how the logistics on the bus would actually work with kindergartners riding along with seniors. Fifth grade. Oh, okay, because what I wasn't getting there was like, wait, some of the buses are going to pick them up on the way to the, so it would only be elementary school buses. Okay, that makes me feel better.
And the best practice basically is for those students, and most buses do this now anyway, that there are seats by grade level. And so the kindergarten students are generally seated right in the front of the bus behind the bus driver.
Can we assign
So that there be that, so can we what?
Can we assign those seats?
Yeah, well, and that's what they do, that they have rows based on the number of students.
Okay.
And that's how. One other piece that I did not mention that I should, one of the questions that will be asked or could be asked is what does this do for non-public school students? The law does require you to provide like services. So if we provide kindergarten busing to Penridge students, any Penridge community member who doesn't attend a Penridge school but attends kindergarten at fill in blank would be eligible for busing. And so we did look at those students in terms of the ones that we are aware of, as well as looking at the programs that provide kindergarten within a 10-mile radius of us, within the border. And so that's basically where our families are. There might be an odd situation that we're not aware of, but for the most part, that's where the preschools and the kindergartens are. We currently run either to or near those buildings, and so again, we do not feel as though this would add to. Most of our what we call non-public runs, where we're running to our parochial schools or we're running to a private school, if they have a kindergarten program, there would be room on those buses for those kindergarten students, and we are running there. And if we're not running there, we're running close enough they could be added to an existing run and would not require an odd run. That was one of my concerns. One of my concerns is that this would mean for 2 students who go to kindergarten at private school X, it would require us to have a separate bus just for those 2 students because we're required to get them there now. We're not currently because we don't bus our kindergarten students. And so we do have to be careful of that, but it is something that we have looked at because it is a potential cost.
Can I ask you, so since we're only busing our kindergartners one way, what happens in a full day program? Are we obligated to, so kids that are going to a full day program, are we now obligated to provide transportation both ways because it's the beginning and end of the day? Or do we only have to provide one run to them because we provide one run to ours? Because I know we have to be the same, but the timeline is different, so I wasn't sure how that's applied to that.
That's the first great question I'll have to get back to you on. Because we actually have full day programs, right? We have some kindergarten students who attend full day. And so we would be putting them on a bus twice, right? Now, it's a small percentage of our kindergarten students, but we would be putting them on a bus twice. And so whether that, because it's a regional program or a special program that wouldn't qualify the non-pubs and we would only have to do one direction, I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to find out.
Are you talking about full-day kindergarten? Are they kids that are already bused because of, IEPs and things like that? Or are these kids that aren't currently bused that would be bused by us adding kindergarten busing?
It could be both because it would depend on whether they're attending their home school or not. If students are not attending their home school for the second half of the day where we have to bus, obviously that busing would continue. We have some students who are attending a full-day program who that is their home school, and so we would have busing for them at the beginning and the end of the day because they would be at their school at the beginning and the end of the day.
But, I mean, are those kids already being, so there are some of those full-day programs that we do ourselves that we're not currently busing for, that we would end up busing for?
For not all of the students, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions. I just have a comment on it. I'm glad that you brought up the 15 minutes of extra instructional time because that is a big deal. Kindergarten is shorter than my children's pre-K was, and it's a really quick turnaround. So having lived through it many times, I think it would be a good thing if we could offer the one-way transportation. And Dr. Ball, just thank you for how thorough you put this together so quickly and so thoroughly. So I just appreciate that.
And just so you know, there was already a vote from one kindergarten teacher that we make that 15 minutes STEM time since they're not currently getting STEM time and they want STEM.
Well, sorry, I did. And to Mrs. Furlong's point earlier, there are things that we provide in the school district that aren't required by law. And so our families are paying for them in their taxes. So to me, this would be another one of those things that it might not be required, but it's a service that would really enhance the experience for them. It's like our sports, band. We don't currently, and I hope we never do personally, charge people for participation in those things. So I just wanted to.
And when you look at most of these kids have older siblings or live in a development where they're getting on the bus at the same exact location. So it's not costing you anything in those situations for one extra kid to get on at that same exact stop and get off at that same exact stop. So I think that, the financial impact is minimal.
One other detail that I failed to mention that I would like to add to this, one of the other pieces that we talked about as we talked to other districts is that if we were to implement this, we would like to also implement the expectation that no kindergartner gets off the bus without an adult that we are aware of. We would need to make that part of our procedures. We would like to at least recommend that so that people know from the very beginning that even if there is a fourth grader getting off the bus, that there needs to be an adult from a kindergarten standpoint. So we have to decide what we're comfortable with in terms of what each child. And we could say, if their sibling is in fourth grade, we're okay with it, but if they're in first grade, we're not. Like, we have to talk through that, but I think we need to make sure that the rules are pretty clear from the beginning because we don't want to change those midstream as best we can. So when we talk to other districts, that was their recommendation, that you really be careful about what you do. We have learned that most school districts, all school districts do kindergarten. Many school districts do kindergarten first grade. Some school districts do kindergarten first grade and second in terms of what is the expected piece for a parent to be there. And then they have rules in terms of how old the sibling has to be responsible to be able to get them into the home and pieces like that. So we would need to work through that as part of our conversation about so that kindergarten parents it's clear what our expectations are in terms of the drop-off piece, obviously. That's more the afternoon than the morning. It's the PM kindergarten because we're dropping them at home, but it's something we need to make sure that they're clear.
Thank you, Dr. Bull. I think everybody's said their piece. I want to thank you for the time, effort, and the detail at which you've approached this. For my own, I think the additional instructional time is huge for the kids. And looking at it a slightly different way, I think our buses are underutilized. And this is just more utilization of available space. It's dead space on the bus, if you will. So it's a better utilization of our resource. So thank you very much.
So I'd like to suggest, if it works, that we give this a month for the board to think about what questions they have. We give the community opportunity to that. Perhaps we send out something to elementary families to just say, hey, we're having this conversation. It will again be on this committee just as a discussion item next month. And it may be no further discussion, but it just puts it again on an agenda. It lets people know we're talking about it. It gives them the tape to listen to just in case they didn't know we were doing this tonight or couldn't make it. That way they can submit any questions we have and then make a determination at that point whether we're going to move something forward for a vote or whether there were things we hadn't thought of that we need to continue to investigate. Right? As long as we have this up and running, a decision one way or another by the May timeframe. They would love it in April, but the May timeframe, push comes to shove, would be enough time to start developing and running. So we have the families registered by then, and so we could put things into the new transportation system.
Great, thank you. That's pretty much the end of the agenda. The next Facilities Committee meeting is scheduled for March 12th, and we're back to public comment. Mrs. Furlong.
Super Long West Rock Hill Township. You're trying to make this sound as if there's no incremental cost. The bus has to stop there anyway, and you're using this year's data. I don't think next year you'll go to this kind of scrutiny because you might have to turn it off because there aren't same stops. The other thing that you're doing is, I'm sure with transportation, the logical thing would be for more people to, in a way, I'm going to say hopefully, because I do think kindergarten is good for children. Don't get me wrong. But hopefully the enrollment would go up if you provided additional services such as transportation. But the problem is the building utilization showed, and we have experienced big drops in our elementary school enrollment. So now you're taking steps to fill up those classrooms that are underutilized for something that is not mandated. And you'll hire teachers, you'll hire teachers' aides, you will be heating rooms, providing light, teaching supplies, STEM teaching supplies. All of this has a cost. And the building utilization showed that this district could save about $1.5 to $2.5 million if it efficiently used its buildings. Go back and read it. I'm getting some odd looks from some people who maybe were not on the board at that time. You need to go back and look at that study. Because when you decide to increase kindergarten enrollment and not take advantage of the efficient use of the facilities in this district, you are costing taxpayers millions of dollars. There is an incremental cost. And there is no reason why parents, if they choose to send their child to Penridge High School for kindergarten, cannot be asked to offset those costs when it's costing us an extra $1 million to $3 million to operate the building that could be repurposed or closed if the whole district operated efficiently for grades 1 through 12. You are costing taxpayers millions of dollars. Don't fool yourself and don't try to fool the taxpayers. We know better.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Yeah.
Sure.
Take my jacket off. Alex Rajan, Bedminster Township. First of all, I want to thank you for your first suggestion about putting tickets in. I did that at my own wedding, saved a lot of money. She was right on that.
I did that last year.